Welcome to another episode of Meet the Ocean. I'm your host, Paul North, and if you are listening to this podcast, then perhaps more than ever, you understand the importance of educational content that can be accessed from home. With over 60 episodes, Meet the Ocean's podcast provides hours of learning opportunities for students, families, and curious minds around the world. And all of this happens because of you. As a nonprofit, we rely on our listeners to share Meet the Ocean with their friends and family and donate whenever possible. You can find ways to help and more underwater content on our website, meettheocean.org. And now, on to our episode.
Meet the ocean.
I remember the first time I went down the winding road leading to the Marine Mammal Center. Their campus of buildings was perched high on the hillside, looking down on the breaking waves that define the California coast. Meet the Ocean was there to present on our educational outreach, bringing Antarctica to schools and children's hospitals, and it was a rare day when the center happened to be closed to the public. This allowed us a chance to explore the facilities and meet the full contingent of staff for the largest marine mammal hospital in the world. Located just north of the Golden Gate Bridge in Sausalito, the Marine Mammal Center acts as a beacon for endangered animals, scientific research, and public education. With over 100,000 annual visitors and outreach programs that build enthusiasm for science and a sense of responsibility for the health of our oceans. With over 1,300 active volunteers and nearly 100 full-time staff, you can imagine the vision and organization it would take to oversee such an operation. And if you can't, don't worry, because we had the honor of sitting down with their medical director to go behind the scenes and learn more about their operation as a whole. She's an unsung hero who has been working on the front lines of marine mammal conservation for decades, keeping injured and endangered animals alive. Thus, it is my privilege to introduce Dr. Cara Field.
Well, hello. My name is Dr. Cara Field, and I'm the medical director here at the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, California.
And for those who perhaps haven't heard of this wonderful organization, maybe we should start by the uniqueness of the actual location that you are upon.
I would love to describe our location. It's absolutely magnificent. We're located just north of San Francisco, California, in the Marin Headlands within Golden Gate National Park. And so we are surrounded by beautiful coastal hills with Rodeo Beach just in front of us and below us. And we are actually located on an old missile site. So during World War II and thereafter, this was all part of a large military base. And when the base was decommissioned, this site became available, and Nike missiles used to be housed here. So when the site was turned over to the national parks, it became available. And in 1975, there was an interest in rehabilitating injured and stranded marine mammals. And so we were able to lease the site from the national park and start taking care of marine mammals instead of missiles.
And just to help our audience out, I think the term marine mammal often has the mind heading in a whaley direction, and, the baleen and the toothed whales. But, there's a lot of variety when it comes to marine mammals. So just from a bird's eye view, how many different creatures do you have come through your door?
There are definitely a lot of marine mammal species. There's 34 pinnipeds, which are seals and sea lions, and of course the walrus. And then there's over 100 different species of cetaceans or whales and dolphins. And some other marine mammals that are really important for us are sea otters. So they're more closely related to other otter species, but they are fully aquatic and marine animals. And then here on the west coast of the U.S., we do not see them, but there's also manatees and polar bears. So we do not see those species here. But we are not selected. If any marine mammal visits our coast and needs assistance, we will certainly help them. But the vast majority of our patients are seals and sea lions, followed by different smaller whales like various dolphins and porpoises. And of course, our sea otters.
Yes, I want to touch upon the sea otters because I got a fantastic tour of your facility. And I noticed that the sea otter holding pen, if that's the correct term, was a bit more outfitted than some of the rest.
Yes, sea otters are incredibly clever little animals, and they're also incredibly ferocious. So they are extremely charismatic. They're very cute to us as human beings. We look at them and you think, oh, how sweet. But in reality, they're quite ferocious. They are a really interesting marine mammal because they're completely dependent on their fur to stay warm. They have to eat, about a quarter of their body weight every day to get enough calories to really survive and thrive. But even though they spend most of their time in the water, they're quite good climbers. So we had to modify our rehabilitation pools to make sure that they would not be able to climb out of them when they're feeling better. We would prefer to control when we release them back into the wild.
On that tour of your facility, I was so impressed not only with what you do, but the size and the extent of the creatures that you can take care of. I mean, you have a very large facility here.
We do. We are actually considered the largest marine mammal hospital in the world, and that's really based on the number of patients that we get every year. Over the last 5 years, we've had more than 800 live animals that we've rescued that have come through our hospital every year, with our peak in 2015 with over 1,800 animals. So a really huge number of animals that come through here, and many of them survive and many of them don't. But because we do have a large number of pools and a large number of holding pens where we can keep them, that gives us the ability to hold probably up to about 200, maybe even just a little over 200 animals at a time. That's pretty unusual in this field. Most facilities are somewhat smaller and have a little bit less capacity. So we're very proud that we consider it so important to be able to assess every animal and get it off the beach and into care, no matter what the case is.
It's an impressive feat just to witness with my own eyes and imagine the amount of work that you do. But for anyone, just considering what 1,800 animals moving through a space in a year and just how sizable these animals can be, that's even more impressive. I'd like to sort of tune people into the process. So basically, it probably starts with a phone call, and take us from there.
Absolutely. So we actually respond to 600 miles of California coastline, and that ranges throughout Northern California, not quite all the way to the Oregon border. There's another stranding center far north, but then all the way from Fort Bragg all the way down to San Luis Obispo. So it's a very broad range. So we respond to animals throughout that 600 miles, any time of day or night if we get a call. And our first questions will be, well, what is it that you're seeing? And can you identify what species it is? Because a lot of people aren't very familiar with marine mammals. And it might be displaying normal behavior, but that might be somebody calling who doesn't know what normal behavior is. So our first response is to get more information. What are you seeing? Where is it? Can you describe it to us? What the animal's doing? And once we get a lot more information, and this day and age is great because everybody has a cell phone, so they can take a picture or a video, and that really helps us figure out if this is a marine mammal, first of all, and if it might need help. And so as soon as we assess that, then we'll send our trained responders out if it's deemed necessary. And those trained responders will get a better assessment because they're trained to know exactly what kinds of problems to look for. So abnormal behavior, evidence of disease or wounds or something like that. And then they'll call back into our dispatch center, and we'll get our veterinary team involved and our response teams involved in deciding if that animal should be picked up. So right there, that's a whole lot of work, as you can probably imagine. There's a lot of calls go back and forth. We often handle 10,000 plus calls per year. So we have a very busy dispatch office responding to all those questions and queries and concerns that people have. And we're happy to do it because even if the end result is that animal does not need help, understanding what people are seeing on the beaches is, and educating people about that is also incredibly important to us. So if it looks like there's an animal that needs some assistance, then we'll dispatch our team. And we have 3 main locations that we do that from, where we have a facility to bring the animal back. So our main hospital here in Sausalito. And so anything north of us or in our area comes directly here to Sausalito. And then we have a temporary holding facility in Monterey and also in San Luis Obispo, so that we don't have to drive that 600 miles in one fell swoop. As you can imagine, that might be a little stressful.
Day or night.
On the animal. Exactly. And on us. So we'll send our teams out to rescue that animal if it looks like it needs that help, bring it back, get some additional assessment. And then once we get a better idea of what we're dealing with it, eventually we'll transport that animal here to Sausalito to our main hospital, and that usually happens over the next 1 or 2 days, depending on what is going on with the animal. If it's a skinny sea lion that just needs some food, then we might stabilize it in San Luis Obispo for a few days or something. If it needs direct transport, then we can do that too. And then once the animal arrives on site in Sausalito, our veterinary team does a physical exam. We get samples to see what's going on with it and decide from there what needs to happen.
Because there's so many steps, I can understand why you covered them in such short sentences. But I think one thing that needs to be emphasized is, again, the size of these creatures. I swim with sea lions all the time. I've been bitten several times. Luckily, I wear dry suits, so it's usually just a bruise and not like a puncture. But very strong neck muscles, very strong jaws. And from talking with some of your staff members, I heard the idea is basically if you can keep their flippers up, then they don't have a purchase, and then you can get them where they need to go for help faster. So do you offer like a jujitsu class for people? Or what's the strategy between keeping the animals safe and the volunteers safe at the same time?
So we actually have, very importantly to our mission, over 1,200 volunteers. And many of those volunteers, we work very hard with them to train them to be able to get these animals in hand, because not surprisingly, as wild animals, many of them do not want to get got in hand. And so they're very upset with us when we come to try to help them. So we do have very different responses too from some of the different species. So probably some of the ones that you've encountered are the bigger, stronger seals and sea lions, and they are very adept in the water, and sea lions and fur seals are very adept on land, especially. Seals are somewhat less adept on land, so they may be a little slower and easier for us to catch. But it can also be a challenge, and they can certainly, every single one of these animals can be dangerous. So it is really important to us. Human safety is the first and foremost aspect of importance to consider. Is this going to be a safe rescue? So we often will not deploy people into a situation that might be unsafe. So an animal is still in the water, or it's inaccessible on some rocks and it's not safe for us to go out there. So we have to really consider all those factors. Is it getting dark? Is the tide coming in? What is the situation? And then it's the animal itself, of course. So as you said, there's some really big animals out there, and we're not going to win an argument with an 800-pound sea lion, probably not without some sort of sedation for the sea lion, of course. So that is something that we have to take into consideration. And there are plenty of times where we might go out with the best of intentions to try to assist an animal, and it's just not one that we can help. A lot of that depends on the mental status of the animal as well. So, for example, a sea lion that's suffering from some sort of trauma to the head, or a biotoxin, and it's maybe having seizures, that animal might be much more easy for us to get in hand because it's not responding to humans coming up to it. But for most wildlife, their first instinct is going to be to get away from these scary people that are trying to capture it, and they don't appreciate what we have to offer them, which that's fine. That's the way it's supposed to be. And we know that if they do let us get that close, that there's probably something wrong with that animal, and that's a stronger impetus even to try to help it.
So we're mammals, they're mammals. This is the Marine Mammal Center. How does the physiology of these creatures differ from ours? And how do you, as the medical director I mean, this is something I'm entirely ignorant of, except for, some knowledge of, how they keep themselves warm. But when you're actually trying to heal an animal, to help an animal, describe that process for a man who doesn't know.
Well, you've been in the water with them, and so you're very familiar with how incredibly adept they are in the water. They're really, all marine mammals are very much in their element in the water, and clearly we are not. Some better than others, I suppose. But marine mammals, they've had tens of millions of years to adapt to this watery environment. A few less for the sea otters, maybe, but seals and sea lions and cetaceans over these many millions of years have adapted to this incredible aquatic lifestyle. So they have very thick blubber, and that blubber helps them maintain their internal body temperature at a temperature that's pretty much exactly the same as ours is. And without that blubber, they actually can get hypothermic or cold just as quickly as we can in some cases. So for them, blubber is incredibly important. But if you think about the other aspects of living in the aquatic life for a mammal, you've got water, which water draws heat away from the body 25 times faster or better than air. So once you're in water, no matter how warm that water is, you're going to get cold pretty fast. So they have to combat that. It's very dark, so they've adapted. Usually they have quite large eyes to be able to see, or cetaceans like dolphins and the toothed whales have echolocation, so that's another cool ability and adaptation that they have. And they have to dive really deep often to find food. So they have the ability, many of them, to collapse their lungs, basically. And that's not something that we can really ever effectively do and expect to come out of unscathed, but they do it with every deep dive. It's pretty amazing. So they have adapted this whole suite of things to be able to live life in the ocean. Dolphins and whales, they rest, they sleep with half a brain at a time. So they always have half a brain working. And seals and sea lions, we're not quite sure how they manage that, but you will see them sleeping, sometimes just floating in the water, sleeping. Sea otters too, they'll often just sleep in the water, maybe grab a piece of kelp to kind of anchor themselves and just fall asleep. So to be able to do everything at sea like that is pretty impressive. And it does make them a little bit challenging to work with because you do have to, in the world of rehabilitation, have water. It's obviously critical for these animals. So that makes our life a little bit more challenging. We need to make sure that we maintain good water, that we have salt water that's available to them. It's better for their skin and their eyes. It's 100% necessity for dolphins and for sea otters. For sea otters especially, their coat quality is so important. So we have to have water, good water, filtered water, and cleaned water. And we need to have the right food. And so marine mammals are obviously very specific in what they eat. So if they're going to be here in the hospital for any length of time, weeks, months even, we need to make sure that we're feeding them correctly. And so we get herring, which is a nice fatty fish that's currently sustainably fished. But it's certainly a concern because as our fisheries collapse and less fish is available, that may make it harder for us to get appropriate food to feed these sick animals on top of what the healthy animals are out there eating. So, and then we have to make sure that they are warm if they're skinny. If they don't have a blubber layer, we have to give them heat so that they don't get too cold. And we have to be able to clean their pens and dispose of any fecal matter or anything. So it's a huge operation. It's not something that you undertake lightly to rehabilitate, to respond to and rehabilitate that number of animals. Obviously, we want to do the very best that we can by each animal. They're here temporarily, so that gives us a little bit more leeway. They don't have to have huge, massive pools. But we do want to make sure that we're not overcrowded, but also that some of their social needs are met too. And so we'll house animals together most of the time because that's how they spend their lives.
Oh, yeah. Highly social. And correct me if I'm wrong, but you make your own salt water on site, no?
We do. Yes. We actually, we bring in a very strong brine, basically salt, and then mix it with our water. And we have an incredibly excellent state-of-the-art ozonation system for cleaning the water so that we don't have to just dump the water and then refill it. We're actually cleaning our water. And so we're using water sustainably by using ozone. We also use UV and have large sand filters. So we're able to clean the water here on site and use a minimal amount.
Yeah, it's impressive. I mean, I walked through it and I felt like I should be on the International Space Station with the amount of all that was going on. And bravo to the community that's helping you guys meet these costs, because by no means is that a inexpensive endeavor. So again, bravo. I want to hear about how you entered this landscape. So Marine Mammal Center started in 1975. When did you come upon the scene?
Just a little bit before then, I guess. I was actually born in Santa Cruz, which is about an hour and a half south of us here in Sausalito. And I had the great good fortune that my parents picked Santa Cruz as a place to live. And it's right on the coast, and it's incredibly beautiful. And it is just a mecca of beautiful aquatic animals. So I grew up surrounded by this amazing location and aquatic animals, both marine mammals, sea stars. I spent my childhood wandering through tide pools and I wouldn't say surfing because I'm not very good at surfing, but
neither am I.
I certainly spent a lot of time in the water, swimming and trying to surf, and enjoying everything the ocean had to offer. So to me, it's been in my blood as long as I can remember.
And what turned your interest to healing animals to basically, in the simplest way, I would say it, become an animal doctor?
That is also one that I have wanted to do as long as I can remember. And I remember when I was a kid that people would ask me, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I didn't know the word veterinarian, so I said animal doctor. And I think I've always been drawn to animals that they don't have a voice. They're not able to really tell us. So I was always wanting to save whatever little creatures I came across that looked like they might need some help, whether it was, I didn't see too many marine mammals that I recognized as needing help, but, little snakes or whatever little creatures inhabited the backyard. We had a canyon behind our house. So every time our cat would bring home injured something or another, lizard, we had one cat that really liked to catch lizards, or whatever else, I would be like, no, bad kitty, and, try to fix it and release it. So I just had, I guess I just always had a desire to help animals. That flourished all throughout my childhood and into college. So that desire to want to be a veterinarian never left. And as I grew older and discovered more about marine biology and the fact that there were people that helped aquatic animals, that once I understood that, I got more and more into the fact that, I could actually help aquatic animals. That would be amazing. Yeah, I really want to do that. And along the way, I discovered a huge love of science too. So it was not just medicine and helping, but it was understanding what it is with these animals. How can they survive this extreme lifestyle when they are basically, otherwise similar to us as a mammal? How do they do that? What's the deal with invertebrates? They're fascinating.
Seriously.
There's so many fish. There's sharks. There's rays. The aquatic realm is just is so rich and amazing. And I found it shocking that not everybody wanted to know more about it. So to me, it was that mixture of science and medicine and how those two things really complement each other, how those two fields are so important, because we cannot do good medicine without understanding the science, without understanding the anatomy, the physiology. And in order to do good science, we want to make sure that we understand all the elements that are involved in whatever aspect it is. So the world is huge and complex, and I found myself having to sort of confine myself, if I wanted to understand the aquatic world better, maybe to that world a little bit. So I think I kind of melded those things together a little bit as an undergraduate and studying marine biology, but I still wanted to be that vet. And so those things together drove me towards doing both a PhD and going to veterinary school. And I did those at the same time, ultimately.
Oh, my goodness.
Which was a bit challenging, but also incredibly, it was an amazing journey because of that complementary aspect of science and medicine. And it was a tough journey, but in the end, I was able to combine those interests and those different passions and make it work.
Were you sponsored by a coffee company at that point, or?
I was mainlining it pretty hard. I'll admit that.
Yeah.
I definitely, I spent a pretty penny at various espresso shops.
Yeah, that's all very impressive. So many questions. Well, this facility is super special, not only because of its size. I think the sheer number of volunteers that you guys have just proves how good the work it is that you're doing. 1,200, that's incredible. But you guys are also conducting research as you're taking care of these animals. And I think that needs to be emphasized. And I'm about to say a word that I don't think a lot of people listening might not have even ever heard before, and that's neurotoxin. What is a neurotoxin? What might produce it? And how would it affect these lovely creatures that are in your care?
That is definitely an important thing in our field. And it is kind of a big word, but if you take it apart, it will make sense, a little bit more sense, as most words do. So neuro, referring to the nervous system, and toxin, referring to something that our bodies are not used to, and that usually causes a bit of a negative response by us. And in this case, the ocean and freshwater, there are many biotoxins that are produced out there. So there are many compounds and things that are produced by animals, by plants, by all these different aspects that can be toxic to us as humans. And in veterinary medicine, it's also really important that we understand which toxins are poisonous to other animals, because they may be, every species might have a different sensitivity to those toxins. But one of the big things that we see as a cause of stranding in our animals that we take in here at the Marine Mammal Center is domoic acid. And that is a good example of essentially a neurotoxin. So as you said, it's really important that we not just respond to animals that are sick and debilitated, but that we understand why they're on the beaches. Why are we seeing them? Did they just get attacked by a shark? Is it sort of a basic story like that? Or are they stranding with seizures and it could have been caused by a bacterial infection, a viral infection, a protozoal infection, or something else? It's really important for us to answer those questions because these animals have a story to tell about the health of the ocean. And so this biotoxin, the neurotoxin that you talk to, one we see very commonly here is called domoic acid, and it's produced by an algae called Pseudonychia. And this is an algae that blooms regularly, that we see just like many other algae in the ocean. But in this case, some of these algal blooms produce this biotoxin or neurotoxin called domoic acid. And when it enters the food chain, the algae is eaten by fish usually, and then sea lions or seals or whatever eats the fish. And some of it falls out of the water column and is filtered by invertebrates like clams, mussels, and crab. So any animal that is eating those, as well as the fish, so sea otters like to eat clam and mussels, for example, and crab. But we also like to eat those things as well. We like to eat all those things, crab, fish, clam, and mussels. And we can also be affected by this biotoxin. So it's one of the things that is really important is to understand how commonly does this cause disease in these animals. And we know that we can also be affected by this as well. And if we're eating the same things as the animals, and we see animals getting sick, that's a good cue to us that there's a problem, that there's a problem in the ocean, in the environment, and these animals are strong indicators for what we may also be expected to ingest if we eat the same things. So it's a naturally occurring biotoxin, but over the last 20 years, we've seen a huge uptick in the number of these blooms that are producing this toxic algae. So that's a huge concern. And since we do have all this historic data to help guide us, we know that this is a real increase. And this could spell real trouble, not just for the animals that eat these foods to survive, but also for us as humans. Because if the seafood we eat is not safe, that has health impacts on us for sure, but also economic impacts. So we have a really strong vested interest in understanding the biotoxin and the effects of it much more strongly.
The ocean has its rhythms, summer, winter, more sunlight is definitely going to cause more photosynthesis in the ocean. But what are you thinking that might be causing this uptick?
That's a great question, and one that's being worked on pretty closely by quite a few scientists, actually. So Algal blooms in general are influenced by nutrient availability in the ocean. They're influenced by temperature, as you mentioned, changes in the time of year. Here in California, there's a lot of upwelling, different currents that are involved, and a lot of different runoff. So that contribute nitrogen and phosphorus and different nutrients or things into the environment with rain. So there's a lot of different factors that go into it. And we do know that certain algae bloom consistently at certain times of the year. And with Pseudonychia, which produces that Domoic acid, that neurotoxin, it used to be that we would see those more in the late summer or fall, but now we're seeing blooms throughout the year at different times of year. Now we see them in the spring, the summer, the fall. We've even seen them extending into the winter. And so those changes alone, just in the 20 years that have gone by since we really discovered that toxin affects marine mammals, we've seen huge shifts in how the sea lions especially respond and when those blooms happen. So that shows how much variability really goes into affecting when those blooms happen. So currently, the California, the state, and a number of scientists are looking into what are the most important factors affecting those blooms, and what are some factors that cause this toxin to be produced by some blooms and not others. But we really, I think at this point, have a lot more questions than answers, and it's changing so rapidly that we may not get one solid answer that says, yes, we see this was this change in temperature or this amount of, upwelling or whatever. It's quite complex. So now we're at a point where we're really just responding, and we don't know if there will be a point where anything that we can do may make a difference in when and how we see these blooms develop.
So you get the call, sea lions acting funny. You successfully remove it from the beach, bring it to your center, and then you have to ascertain sort of what stage it's at, because there is still hope. It just matters at what point you catch the animal in.
Yes, we're always hopeful in these cases. And one really important aspect is that I mentioned is that the animals are indicators of what's happening in the ocean. So they may be the first and most sensitive indicators when we see a sea lion on the beach having seizures that there's an active bloom going on. But at the same time, we do have the California Department of Public Health, and many of our science partners are collecting water samples regularly to look for this species of algae and any species of algae that could produce a neurotoxin or a biotoxin. And when those line up really strongly, that creates a picture. That being said, we see sort of two different conditions. So we see what we call an acute presentation, where usually that's defined by we see more than one animal in a certain area strand on the beach with seizures or other abnormal neurologic presentation. And usually that means that there's an active bloom in the area, that the fish are eating the algae, the sea lions are eating the fish, and many of them are getting sick. And yes, many of those animals, we can treat them, and they can pull through. But another sequela of that is they get a chronic condition that's very similar to epilepsy after brain damage has occurred. And that can happen in marine mammals and in people. And that's why this kind of toxicity is called amnesic. They don't remember how to be sea lions. And so even if we get them through sort of this acute phase and we release them, there may have been permanent brain damage. And so they'll just kind of swim around and wander around and forget where to go and what to do, and probably be hungry, but not really know how to catch fish anymore. And then, within a week or 2 or 3, they might have another seizure and they could die at sea, drown, or have some other problem. So this is a really tough question for us. And this is really important in our assessment when the animals are going through rehabilitation. Are they responding appropriately? Are they recovering? Are they going to have another seizure? And there's no way, other than getting an MRI, there's no way to say for sure if they have brain damage or not. So that's a huge problem. So we've had years where we've had over 200 sea lions that strand with Domoic acid poisoning, and it's just not possible to do an MRI on every sea lion. We're very good, though, at assessing their behavior and knowing what normal sea lions should be doing. And in some cases, we can also potentially track the sea lion by putting a satellite tag on it. Of course, those are very expensive and cost at least $1,000 each, several $1,000s each. So again, that's not something that's feasible for us to do in every case. So we have these behavioral assessments that we do, and we also try to measure the toxin in different samples. Usually we can measure it in urine or in fecal samples. So that will help us help guide what we know is going on with them. But ultimately, this biotoxin takes a real toll on the population, and less than half of the animals that strand that come into our hospital that have Domoic acid actually get released.
Wow. Processing.
Yeah. It's a pretty astounding number. And when you add in potentially if we have a bloom during the time of year when the adult females are pregnant and ready to give birth, it affects that fetus as well as the mother. And so now you've got a whole nother generation of that animal being affected as well. So it can be pretty brutal. And it's something that we really need to stay on top of, understanding how frequently this toxicity is occurring, where it's occurring, what time of year, so that we can build a better understanding of what's happening in the ocean.
Well, let's talk about the victory lap, because you do so much to gather these creatures in, low, precarious moments when they're ill and sort of teetering. You rehabilitate them, but then comes the moment where you actually get to release them back in the wild. And I'm sure that has an extensive amount of emotion involved in it, but also celebration. So what is the ritual of that for you guys?
I feel like it's probably personal to some extent for every single person, because as you've heard, it takes an army. It takes a huge team to get any one of these animals through this entire process and get them turned back out into their world. And we know it's a world that is increasingly fraught with risk, both from natural and especially from human factors. So it's always a very happy moment when we get an animal through rehabilitation, we see it recover its health, and we're setting it back out on the path that it's supposed to be on. It's always a good feeling. There's no denying that, especially animals that, they came in malnourished, younger animals that come in malnourished and for some reason they got separated from their moms, or their mom died or something like that, and to give them a second chance it's a fantastic feeling. But I think, to me, the ones that have the strongest impact are the ones that have been affected by human activity. Those are really, to me, the ones that we can kind of right that wrong. So an animal that's been maybe entangled in trash or discarded or lost gear or something like that, those are the cases that I really feel like this wasn't this animal's fault. This was completely, the reason it's here is because of human activity. And, we really helped this animal get out of this bad situation. So to me, they're extra meaningful. But we have we do see some diseases, some of the same diseases over and over and over. But then, to me, the amount that we learn from each and every individual is incredibly valuable in helping the species. So while I do think very much about the individual as a patient and as an animal that has the chance to go back out there and help the species survive, I also think about the health of the whole group, so of the greater group of that species, of that ecosystem, and what that animal's return to the wild might mean. And this is really relevant for endangered species like our southern sea otters, Hawaiian monk seals. There's only 1,400 Hawaiian monk seals, so they're critically endangered, and literally every female, especially that we save, can have an impact on that population. So these are, it's not just because we're helping animals whose populations are doing okay. There's so many factors that go into their health that being able to rehabilitate them, figure out why they're here, make a scientific inquiry and report that data, and then see them out there thriving again. It's really that whole package that really rocks my world. And it makes me feel really good that we've been able to give those animals a voice, not just as an individual, but as a representation of what's happening in the world.
So to wrap up, an individual such as yourself who interacts with the ocean as much as you do, here we are in the age of Google where there's more information than ever before. What would you say to our listeners about why they should pay more attention to the ocean?
As you can imagine, I probably have a lot of thoughts on that, but I guess for me, because I grew up in the ocean, on the ocean, next to the ocean, saw it every day, to me it's a no-brainer. It's something I absolutely love and feel a need to protect. It's an unbelievable world. It's absolutely incredible. The animals, the climate, the oceanography, the waves, everything about it is just amazing to me. The diversity of life, really. And the reason that we're on this planet is because of the oceans. We're 3/4 of our planet is ocean. So I feel like we have an obligation to understand it better. So to me, that's real easy. And to my family and friends who may not live next to the ocean, they probably sick and tired of me saying how great and wonderful it is and how they should care. But at the same time, we're all completely 100% dependent and tied to it. So even if you don't realize that, it's true, we are. And whatever happens out there, it does affect us, even, albeit probably pretty slowly, so it's hard to keep track of. So to me, I think it's really important to bring that to people. So if you've never been there, if you've never had, the privilege of dipping your toes in this kind of scary but amazing watery substance, and it'd be great if you can get out there. And if you can't, it's totally understandable. Not everybody can. Then the next best thing, like take your Google and Google some stuff, and visit an aquarium or watch like some of the shows like Blue Planet or some of those things that really shows up the incredible diversity of the animals that live in it, the importance of the water and why we care and how it drives our climate and our weather. I mean, the list is endless. So to me, it's I don't know. I have a passion for it. So something that I love, I would love for everybody else to love too. And the animals that we take care of here they're very charismatic, and so it's really, really easy to love them just based on looks alone. So to me, I hope that can be a good medium for gaining people's interest and getting people excited about the outdoors and the amazing effect that it can have on all of us.
Well, I thank you not only for your time in this interview, but for the work that you do. It's truly something special, and everyone should check out the Marine Mammal Center.
.org.
.org.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for giving me a chance to reach people.
I hope you get cards from friends every once in a while that call you an ocean angel.
I'm not sure about that. Maybe ocean nerd.
Well, aren't they one and the same?
Yes, the MarineMammalCenter.org, where you can find out more about the rescued animals, scientific research, educational programming, and volunteer opportunities the Marine Mammal Center has to offer. Do remember, they are the world's largest marine mammal hospital with over 1,300 active volunteers. Such a big operation needs constant support, so we at Meet the Ocean would like to say thank you to the community of those who give their time and money to aid such a noble operation. Did we mention they also operate in Hawaii to help protect their endemic monk seals? Oh, and they get over 100,000 visitors every year. What about how cool their scientists are? Okay, I know at this point it sounds like I'm being overly enthusiastic, but I beg to differ for two reasons. The first, the Marine Mammal Center has been contributing to global knowledge about marine mammal health for years. The second, I am most certainly crossing my fingers in hopes that the next distressed sea otter that is placed in their care will be given the name Charlotte, for no particular reason. And now, a round of barking pinnipeds in honor of the medical director of the Marine Mammal Center, Dr. Cara Field. Meet the Ocean is produced by Paul North and Andrew Gettings with sound design by Kelsey Anderson. Special thanks to Cara Field for being an ocean angel. We are a listener-supported nonprofit. You can find more podcasts, underwater creatures, and ways to donate to our educational outreach on our website, meettheocean.org. Subscribe to our podcast to never miss an episode, and please rate and review Meet the Ocean on Apple Podcasts or on whatever you listen to. This is Charlotte Fisher signing off. Until next time, may the saltwater be with you.